transactional aspect of all of this. I mean, one of the remarkable things about an inbox is that it's not just carrying work information, it's also mapping out social relationships, the symbolic dimension of what you're up to, and a tag.
New technology, the way of the future.
To be the person from a technology company and not actually be able to use the technology.
We've got a loud hail around the table.
I know, excellent, and a foghorn would be even better. One of the things I'm really struck by is the fact that all of those filtering tools ask users effectively to, in some ways, encode which are the social relationships that are important. And suggest a kind of rationalism to it that we know is not true. A filter system may say, well, the boss from your email is, the email from your boss comes to the top and is the one you should most answer. I'm willing to bet there are a number of people who have complicated relationships with their management chains, and whether it's the email they should answer or the email they are going to answer may be two very different things.
Yeah.
And, asking in some ways our tools to do the work we won't even engage in as human beings might create a whole other set of issues and problems.
But I also think there's an opportunity here. If you look at sort of somebody who's new to an enterprise and gets a problem, I mean, email is wonderful if you know who to forward the problem to or who to ask. But if you take all of this metadata back and get out of email filtering rules and actually, have the system sort of say, to solve this problem, we think it's probably these 5 people, and you can get some help. You can open up a whole lot of expertise location. You can really, I think, change the way people find.
How do you get to knowing about those 5 people?
And God forbid you should ask someone.
Yeah.
I mean, until we get to a point where everyone is somehow atomized and telecommuting from their homes, chances are there is someone sitting near you who may know those things.
So I'll take exception with that, right? I mean, if we look at sort of, if we look at a lot of, and no, my batteries are working.
Can I just recommend people, pick 5 minutes and just watch Genevieve's face when she's not talking. She's got the most expressive face I've ever seen.
But,
yes, sorry,
so our clients, in the context of a workplace, our clients constantly tell us, that they are now more global. A typical large corporation will have half their employees, will be with them less than 5 years. So they literally don't have the opportunity to go to talk to someone. So, sort of the collective intelligence of what's in their internal social networks and, all the metadata around communication actually needs to be presented to them, because the old style of working just doesn't scale. I mean, people aren't there.
Globalization.
That's
in
it.
The past 10 years has completely revolutionized the world, and also how we work and our productivity around that.
But now that then confronts us with the discovery problem, and this is the secret of Facebook's success, is it made it really easy to discover the people in your networks.
Right.
Yeah, well, let's open it up to other
media.
media.
It's really easy, but what did you just kill yourself off of?
Yeah, we'll come to that.
Well, of course, apart from email, there's many phones, landline, mobile, SMS, voicemail, Facebook, Twitter, and they're all, in some ways, they all operate independently, which means sometimes people are getting information in and sending information out on 6 different things. Is that too much? So there has to be...
But it's, I don't think it is separate things, because essentially with the smartphone revolution, you have everything in one place, right? You have the ability to have all of these applications working in the background at the same time. The inference there is that, you're logging in and you're logging out of 6 or 7 different media, which is not actually the case.
No smartphone, no matter how smart, is actually big enough to cover my entire social graph, because everything is everywhere. I will give you a circumstance from my own experience about when I quit Facebook, which I did at the end of May, and I set up a Posterous account for people to be able to, so I could share things with people when I left left Facebook. I'd never leave Twitter.
That's what you said about Facebook a year ago.
And
fickle man.
And so I started to tell my friends in my social graph that I'd be leaving, and this is where they could find me. And someone said to me, "Oh, I'm so sorry you're leaving. We just reconnected. I guess we won't connect anymore." I was like, "I just told you where you can find me." It's like, that's too hard. If you're over here and they're over there and they're over there. And so what I've started to think about and what I started to actually design is a tool that actually brings all of those elements together, because that's the missing element. The smartphone can be as smart as you want, but if everyone is still atomized, if everyone is still
I think that's already
you're going to
coming.
need a tool to bring it together.
That's already coming. I mean, you can look at different OS at the moment, including BlackBerry OS 6, which that brings those things together. So, we're coming to a time where, you're basically looking at an individual and you see their whole social map, right? And it's also mapping, your social networking to theirs as well.
When you left Facebook, did you say it's not you, it's me?
Are we taking bets?
The thoughts on the plethora of different communication tools and whether they make things simpler or more complicated, Genevieve?
So I'm struck, of course, as I'm always am listening to Mark, that I violently disagree with him. But, you know, in a very particular way, right? I mean, one of the things that we saw, we do fieldwork all over the globe. We'd spent some time recently in a range of countries that have very fast broadband, a lot of device sort of circulation and adoption, Korea being one of them. It's really common when you walk into any church in Korea that in the foyer there is a sign that says one of a number of things, my favourite one of which is, turn off your phone and listen for the call of God.
Wow.
Underneath of it, there's a little tiny asterisk that says, oh, and we have a cell site dampener here, so your phone won't work anyway. The next church will have a sign that says something like, you know, turn off your phone, it would be a blessing. And one of the things I was really kind of struck by as I started to think about that was that while we talk in a work sense and in a personal sense about all these forms of communication and connection and social networking and engagement, what I'm also starting to see in the research we do is people seeking out spaces where they can be explicitly disconnected, and either by nature of the space forcing them to do that, so a cell site dampened church, or, you know, the central coast of New South Wales where you don't get 3G reception, good place to go if you want to get off the grid, or people actually actively, God forbid, using the button on the top of the device to actually turn the device off.
I think that's why
there's this sort of sense of trying to disconnect.
In the 70s, people used to build bunkers in case there was a nuclear war. Now it's for that. It's the same thing. What do you think, Alison?
You know, I think it's a contradiction. People want to be connected. I mean, so if you want to make somebody anxious now, disconnect them and sort of, you know, watch that anxiety flow. At the same time, I think people want to, you know, sort of have some control. So I think it's how do we start thinking about taking out the burden of processing from people? You know, how do you start, you know, letting them actually feel a little bit more control? How do you let people see priority stuff, not everything? How do you make them feel like work isn't, you know, just responding to email? How do you make them feel like they're actually getting something done? And that's getting more complicated, but I think, you know, they're not going to shut off.
I mean, I think it's because we never had, until say a few years ago, the pressure of so much connectivity. We never really gave a thought to the pressure or to the desire to be disconnected. It's only because we're now constantly connected that we want to be disconnected.
Right.
And because of that extraordinary tension between all of our devices, which function better when they're constantly connected to power and networks, and human beings, which in some ways function better when they're intermittently disconnected.
We're like spoiled brats, aren't we? Oh, I want this, I want that, I want this iPhone, I want to be connected. Oh, why is it ringing all the time? I can't get any peace. Well, we're ridiculous, us humans. What about some of the alternatives or potential alternatives to email? Can any of them, in your view, do the hard yakka required for day-to-day business communication, especially where you've got to be really mindful of security and accountability, Adele?
Well, I mean, I think security is always going to be top of mind, right? Particularly in the enterprise. You know, we've already talked about how, you know, emails become an electronic record, and it's acceptable as an electronic record now. But, you know, the reality is, you know, we have IT policies that in place which are extremely stringent and don't necessarily make good use of the technology that's in place. So just because there's, you know, 400 or 500 boxes that you can check to basically lock something down from a security perspective doesn't necessarily mean you should be doing that. And I think as our relationship as humans evolves with technology, and, you know, technology becomes very, very personal, you know, maybe some of the boxes need to start becoming unchecked to really address some balance.
Why this smug smile?
Yeah, it's really interesting because email has become a record, because I've dealt with companies, sometimes that means they think very carefully about whether something goes into an email. Yeah. All right, because it now does go into the record. So often now they're looking for, okay, can I do this in a casual conversation versus putting it in the record so that it cannot be actionable?
Do you know the round the block rule? Oh, I'm so angry. No, you are such an idiot. How could you stupidly do that? Oh, I hate you. Walk around the block, then decide if you're going to send it. So easy, isn't it? Like in the old days, you had to letter, buy the stamp, they'll give you time to cool off. But do you think any of the alternatives to email can actually replace it?
It's not one thing. I mean, the thing is, email was the one thing until, I don't know, what, 2005 or something? And now it's a billion things. So, I mean, the way I think of it is, it's, you know, email was this lovely mushroom that died and released all these spores, and they went flying everywhere, and they have now, you know, they've now infiltrated everything.